Corebase is part of a generation of tools. It's really built to make cybersecurity easier. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the MSP Cyber Roundtable. I've got Ted White here today. This is the first time we've had a talent expert on the show, actually. So I'm actually sort of excited to explore this space. But we had a brief green room experience. Ted, I did not get the opportunity to actually ask, what are your plans for the next 2 weeks? We have like this, it seems like perfect storm of Christmas and New Year's on Wednesdays, blowing 2 weeks like straight off of the calendar.
Yeah.
How does that feel?
Yeah. It's like, remember that week vacation I told everybody about? No, thank you, Matt. Thanks for having me today. The next 2 weeks are going to be awesome, actually. We're going to be doing some preparing for the holidays and seeing my sisters at one of my sister's houses and my mom and so forth. And then one of my best friends from Texas is coming on up to celebrate a big milestone birthday. And we're going to see each other, hang out, and have a good time.
Yeah, I'm sort of wondering if I'm really going to want to come back to work after like 2 like total holiday weeks of like, I'm going to be in the office, but it's going to be like the lightest load ever, I think.
Yeah, probably. But you know what? In my world, it leaves quite a bit of room for people to be available. If you've got 3 people, let's say, that you've been trying to get a hold of, they're your top 3 or maybe 3 to 5 or so, put them on your agenda for next week. If you accomplish one thing and get a hold of that one person, by making 5 phone calls, that's a pretty darn productive vacation.
Yeah, I guess that's I was thinking this is my strategy time to really do thinking that doesn't get interrupted every 15 minutes. But you're right that making those personal connections, this is probably a great time for that.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about recruiting in the MSP space later. But Ted, you arrived into this segment, and we're oftentimes talking to a lot of MSP insiders or security industry insiders, and you're sort of you're like one leg in and one leg out, right? You're right, in at the edge of the space, right? Really helping those people that are inside with these skills that, like, frankly, like our industry is not really great at HR in general, right? Like there are some service providers that do like a really great job, but ultimately, like, most of my partners are like, engineer first, right? Um, and people in process, sometimes first, usually second. But in terms of people development, hiring people, recruiting people, that's an area that's challenging. So you found this space, but how did you get here? And how did you become a people person anyway? That's what I want to know.
Oh, which one first? People
Well,
person.
you could go chronological if you want to tell a story.
Oh, okay. Yeah. People person. Yeah, that's where I was going. Right from college, I had great friends in college, and they helped try to socialize me and, put me through really excellent, experience at University of Connecticut, which was great. We had a great time. And I realized that the more I relied on relationships and things, the more that I wanted to work with people. And that was really my primary goal of graduating UConn, was just to work with people. So I had the opportunity to work as an agency recruiter. I had no idea what it meant, but it checked all the other boxes, working with people and not even being paid to eat food with lots of people and get a car allowance and do pretty well. So I went into headhunting, went into corporate recruiting. I was in corporate HR leadership and uh, thought about what kind of business I could do. And, that just happens to be recruiting. I've got 26 years of recruiting experience in various different roles, and I've learned how to negotiate with some of the smartest people in the world out there too. And I think when it comes down to it, is just using logic for setting expectations reasonably and being transparent, coming in, at the right time, doing things in order, in a way, and answering questions before they're even asked. If you can kind of do all that stuff, you're doing all the right things. The problem that, well, I don't know if you want me to go into the problem at all.
Well, not quite yet,
Yeah.
but I do want to talk about what it's like. So, I happen to be wearing the CEO hat right now, which means that I have 3 jobs that are all sales. I have to sell our value to partners and customers, right? People who are going to be buying our solution, right? That's my primary job, but I've got 2 other primary jobs that are competing for that because we're a software company. One of those things is what that oftentimes means is that you bring in some outside help and capitalization, but also if you're really great and you build a great piece of software, the ultimate home is usually with some other software. And so also what I have to do is I have to sell the company to someone else, not just sell the product to someone else, right? Eventually that's also a primary hat. And then I have a third primary sales hat, which I have to sell to my recruits, to people that I want to bring on team. I have to sell that this is like a mission, this is a team, this is a culture that they want to be a part of to like make an impact. And I think a lot about all 3 of those sales roles every single day.
Mm.
And I often feel like an imposter about all 3 of those things. And so um, I'm curious. Now I ended up, with that team building responsibility as a requirement of operating my business, but you were attracted to that role. You like a magnet, I guess, the way you described it. Like you went right there, and I think that a lot of people in my industry, engineering insiders, we get like headhunter outreach in our inbox, and sometimes people have this like ick feeling, right? But now that I'm in this chair, and also I think we just went through like a really difficult talent, like 10 years. The last 10 years have been like really disruptive in talent, in engineering talent, and a lot of back and forth. And so come to really value, right, what it really means to have an agent working for you, selling to someone the idea that they want to join your team, right? And I think that I really appreciate that. Is that Was that your first gig in HR, or did you start doing other things?
Yeah, basically, it was recruiting right from the get go, right from the beginning. And when I landed, when we decided to go into business and recruiting, you asked about my first MSP that I worked with. So I worked with various businesses. I placed some people, architects, and on the website and the software side, and pretty large companies. But I really, really had uh, a match with this company right up the road from me that was an MSP. If I can mention their name, Compass MSP. They formerly were called IT Direct. So they had about 20 people, and I got along really well with them. And I just had a lot of fun supporting their business and helping them grow, growing from 20 people or so up to 25, 30 more people. And it was a lot of fun. I said, how do I do this again? That's kind of, I think, the one of the more important questions you have in life when you've done something that you've really enjoyed doing. How do I keep doing this? And then I got good at marketing. I realized that marketing to MSPs was the best thing that I could do. It was just straight, direct, concise communication that we just troubleshooted and got better and better with. So at the end of the day, it is the communication piece. If you're selling, stop selling is my motto.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk more deeply about that. What is, what are the implications of our specific market, right? What are the things we're get bad at? How should we be better? But before we do that, I'm going to jump in today's Security Essentials lecture. Real short here. We're going to talk about security charters. So let's talk about a security charter. And by the way, I am aware that many of the people watching this video have never heard of a security charter before. This is a thing that a few years ago you only saw in very large organizations, government agencies, maybe not even all government agencies, just some of the big ones. This importance of documenting the root of authority of a cybersecurity program. The idea here is that if you're going to have something so important in your organization, that it's managing all of the cyber risk, right? And that there's going to be these insurance policies that are going to be um, making assumptions over how good of a job you did. There's legal requirements, things that may impact regulatory compliance, things that may impact whether you as a director or even an employee are seen to be doing the things you're supposed to be doing, or are you considered negligent? Right? Um, the importance of establishing this both chain of authority and chain of trust in the cybersecurity program from the board down through the organization has become more critical than ever. And the security charter is an actual document. Typically, it's this piece that exists between the board and the executive office and the actual stuff that happens in your cybersecurity program, like implement a bunch of policies and procedures. So it's the linking thing. I usually recommend to keep it simple. So the idea is to set out that executive mandate. Um, Make sure that the program's authorized. Make sure that it's discussed like what's the goal. And I know stay safe, stay secure, but a little more specifically, like protect the whole organization, protect part of the organization. Do we need to be concerned with regulations or not? That kind of thing. And of course, create the role information security officer. So when we talk about priorities, it's actually really important for the board and the executive to decide what what is a security program supposed to do. I know everyone wants to say secure online and what their business is to be secure, but secure from what, right? Like, is the goal to keep customer data in? Is the goal to make sure your factory line always runs? Is the goal to make sure the machines keeping someone alive in a hospital don't fail? Like, what's the goal, right? That's important to lay out. It's important to lay out that who's in charge of the thing, establish that CISO. In some organizations, you actually have separate ISOs, information security officers, for different parts of the organization, and then clarify exactly what is covered under that security program. So all IT systems, some IT systems? Is there a responsibility for vendor oversight, right? Is it the entire business or is it just this one business line? Is there a security enclave? Um, is there part of the business that needs to be secured in a really different way than the rest of the business? Those are all things that should be in the security charter. Um, so the when you establish one of these, and it can be a one pager, right? It's it's really the best way to prove to someone else that the organization has some kind of overall cybersecurity strategy, which is it's literally a question that's asked sometimes. Does your organization have an overall cybersecurity strategy? And people often want to just say yes, but if you don't have a document that proves it, it's hard to back that up sometimes. And so, that's one point. The other thing to do is really like to get that executive mandate documented. So when you create that charter, the CEO or the board chair or someone's going to sign it with their name and a date, right? And if anyone in the organization says, I don't want to do this security thing, that's the document that you bring to the table and say, look, the CEO said we are doing this thing. right? So that's another thing to consider. I think I pretty much covered the basics. But again, this fits in sort of like an overall cybersecurity architecture, right? So you got the charter at the top, right? You may choose a standard or multiple standards in your organization. You'll have the governance structures below that, right? Committees, groups of people, processes, right? Um, and that all sort of hangs down from the top. That's mandated from above. Anyway, that's it about security charters. So, Ted, um, thanks for coming today. We're back in talent land here. Um, I'm not sure where to start this story, but I do know that when we spoke for the first time, I was telling you a story about my hiring experiences, um, and some of the great candidates and some of the like imperfect candidates that I've worked with over like my whole career, right? And how I've struggled to improve that um, myself. When you put a opening out there and you get sometimes a couple or sometimes 100 candidates that submit, right, or more, right? How do you know when you have the right candidate? Like if you get 5 candidates, right, and you choose one, is that the right person? If you get 100 candidates and you choose one, is that the right person? This is a struggle for people that occasionally recruit or hire, right, and they don't do it all the time. And you dove right into, well, there's like X and Y and Z and pillar and like all these things to be looking at, and how important it is to not hire the wrong person. And it was really resonating with me. So that's sort of how we came to this conversation today. I'm not actually sure how to, if you have an order of operations, you want to explore this space, but I think the big thing is, um, you know, team building's hard, right? Team expansion's hard. It takes methodology, right? It takes focus. And making a mistake in team building is just as harmful as making a mistake, or more harmful than making a mistake in implementing some technical system, right? Technical systems are oftentimes easier to fix, I think, than
Hmm.
bringing the wrong person. Um, so yeah, it's the ball's yours now. Here.
The ball is mine. I don't even know where to start. So where would you like me to start with all of that? I
Well,
think
I
offering some kind of key takeaways that I feel
well
very
let's
strongly about.
let's back up a little bit, because I know I've told you a little bit about my experiences, but I also hear, because I talk to a lot of MSPs, a lot of IT service providers and professionals about their team building, and um, the number one question I hear is, I don't know how to find customers, right? And the number two question after you solve that one, right, is, I don't have enough people. I can't build a team. I don't have enough people, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how to hire. I don't know how to team build. I can't get my people to develop whatever XYZ skill set. I can't get them to do the right thing, right? And that's like the number, and that's like a whole like Pandora's box of like problems all related to, I can't figure out how to hire the right people. And I think that there's a lot of reasons why that is. Um, Before we sort of dig into candidate selection, what are the stories you hear? Because I think you're having even more of these conversations than I am.
Yeah, we're lots of them, and I love this conversation. It's one of my favorites. Where do we start? Still is the question, because yeah, what would I do? I mean, you really have to be confident in your ability to um, post a job out there and leverage, like optimize the tool that you're using to post that job. And you have to be prepared to take some time that you did not have budgeted on your calendar and multiply that time times 10 and put that on your calendar every single day, because you'll be reviewing resumes, and it doesn't matter if it's 5 or 100. It's still, if it's 5, it's going to, and you haven't done that before, it's going to take a long time. um, there are certain ways to go about looking at resumes, but have your qualifications up, like your core values, because if you don't have the qualifications up, as if they're your core values, you might actually start making the mistake of comparing all of the candidates to each other when those candidates are yet to match your qualifications or meet your qualifications. So the game is not to compare the best applicants to each other and choose the best one. The game is to look for and hire a candidate who meets the qualifications. And you do that by looking at a resume. You look at a few key things to make sure they're not job hoppers, they show longevity somewhere, they're in the industry, they're a troubleshooter, and you can kind of identify certain things about a candidate. If they don't have industry experience, then just ask questions about their ability to multitask and work with 20 to 30 clients. And I do have a third zinger in here that would be a shocker to your listeners, I think. Shocker coming from a recruiter.
Do you, well, yeah, I'm in suspense. You have to.
I love it. I love it. So the big shocker is I recommend, especially for sales candidates, I recommend using assessments. I recommend using behavioral based assessments. Cultural index would be my first one, and predictive index and a few more. The longer outputs, the longer it takes to have a candidate take the exam, the less likely they're going to be interested in taking it. And the longer the output, an 80-page output is going to take the company years to study to figure out what to look for in the patterns. If an assessment company is consistent and they're accurate and you can validate that data, validate the data if you're hiring a salesperson with the best salespeople in the industry that you want to emulate, like Weird Science. You
Well,
want
so how do you? Well, okay. You just covered so much ground, and I'm still back at.
sweet. I love
So
that.
I'm still back at what I talk to some of my partners about. Well, I will meet with them sometimes week after week after week, and I'll hear like 5 weeks in a row. Oh yeah, I still haven't posted yet. I just don't have the time. And and I'm thinking to myself, well, you just need to get the post out there because you need to start collecting profiles and interest, and there's a whole process, and you talked about some of the process, but you have to start someplace. So is there like a like from a time management perspective, is this like what's the most successful way to can you just post and then like wait 3 weeks and look at everyone at once? Do you have to look every day? Do you is there like a better time of the week or better time of the month to do this kind of thing? Like
Like
I'm
buying.
wondering these things, but I actually like literally hear people ask about these things, and I'm like, I have no idea.
Yeah, it's hard. But if you have a network, you want to start there. If your network is huge, and what I mean by your network is the network that you brought up with the career and your LinkedIn network. So that would be the first place to start because you're going at known commodities. You know these people and you know what they're capable of doing and all that. Um, I think that yeah, the science, like if you're going to post a job, make sure that you can post a job that has particular filters available. Filters being knock in and knock out questions. Do you have VMware? Are you strong in, what is your experience with servers, firewalls,
You mean
routers?
you mean literally like the platform you're posting on, that's possible to do? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. The platform that you want to post it, make sure that there's some kind of mechanism to weed out the good and the bad people, the good and the bad, the qualified and the non-qualified.
Uh-huh.
So um, at the minimum, but you could kind of do that and put your assessment in a particular area in the process to help that weed out some of the other people, almost kind of like you have a recruiter who's able to make 10,000 calls in 3 minutes. And they're able to say, hey, do you have this, that? Okay, great. It's just a few questions that you would need to ask to qualify, that
You're
person and see.
you're right. So it seems like if I rewind a couple decades, like the application process was like literally the process of gathering applications, right? And literally as someone looking for a job, the process of submitting your application used to be super important. But these days, like, the whole world's information is at our fingertips, right? So what you're describing is really not an application process. It's really it's like a profile filtering process, like you're on a dating site, and that's sort of the experience these days, right? Is it if you can't find any profiles, you're doing something wrong, right? But
Yeah.
like really the being able to dig in and filter to the right people to even spend your time in sounds like the critical to you what you're describing. That's a critical start, right?
To target
Start point.
to target, have a certain target to go for, and to um, not accept anything that does not meet those requirements, not accept any resumes that do not meet those requirements. Do not do 50 phone screens in hopes that you're going to like somebody, because what's going to happen after 50 phone screens is you're only going to compare unqualified people to unqualified people and pick from the best of 50 unqualified candidates. So have your ideal person in mind for that role, write it down and all the magic that comes along with that, and this go for that person. Do what it takes to get that person on board. We've got a lot of tools that are, fingertips, like you said. Um, People love to hear how your company is doing things different than their current company. A lot of companies, the onboarding process and the longevity with your employees start at the candidate level. You're setting expectations with them. If you tell a candidate that they have, that your company has a solid 30, 60, 90-day plan for them, and that you're really interested in investing in their career, they're going to jump for joy. They're going to be like, oh my goodness, when can I start? Because that's what they're not getting right now.
Okay, so there's some prereqs that I heard there. In terms of like have a plan, right? Have a strategy, right? And then you mentioned assessments, and um, it sounds like there's places you can go to administer these. Like you don't have to write the things yourself. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, good. Yeah, you don't. They're already basically off the shelf, and they're your way of kind of customizing it for you is actually the process of validating it for you. How would you find another you? You would take the assessment, and then all these other candidates might take the assessment, and some of them might come back just like your profile. And it's like you don't really you can communicate extremely well with that other person because they get you.
All
So I
right.
guess I've
So
never been on a dating site. I think the internet was happening right when I met my wife. So, but I do think of it like kind of like that, where you're setting up a selection process and do not, you know, accept anything that's not acceptable.
make sure you eat the same food, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Um, so all right. So I mean, how do we okay, so taking assessments yourself, that sounds great. What about the rest of the team? Is that like something that's pretty normal to like you got like 5 guys, you got 10 guys, like, hey guys, can you take this assessment? We're trying this out for the new team we want to hire. Is that a normal thing to go say
heck yeah, heck yeah,
baseline? Yeah, that sounds really
totally.
useful. Yeah.
Because even for a salesperson, I think all sales candidates are fantastic. They're such great people. And then beyond that, it's like, well, you can ask them about their metrics, but their metrics at their company are completely different. And I don't quite follow those things that quickly sometimes. So, but if they take an assessment and they assess like the personality of one of the top or two or three of the top salespeople in an organization, or one of your friends' organizations, a peers organization, and you say, hey, do you mind if your guy takes this? You take a look at that
Oh,
out.
that's a really interesting idea. Yeah.
That's validation right there, right? Imagine sending that out to 100 hungry applicants that want a new sales position, and three of them line up culturally like that high performer. Suddenly, all I would be concerned about at that point is if they were job hoppers or not. If they weren't if they had longevity, and more than likely if they're working.
So what's a job hopper to you? Because I know that this definition's changed over the years. Like if we rewind a few decades ago, people got a job at 22, and then they retired at 65. Um, and that was many people's career. Um, and I think in I've heard in some organizations they just move you along after 2 years. They're like, oh yeah, you're out of here. You were here for 2 years. You accomplished a great thing. You're out. We're going to bring someone new in. And some organizations have that culture built in. Um, what is like what's a red flag and what's a green flag there?
Oh boy. So it's actually, I'll flip that and say what we look for instead of what we disqualify. Because what we look for, remember, I put my standards up there. What we look for is industry experience, number one. The second thing is what we like to see is somebody with at least 2 to 3 years of experience at their current MSP.
Hmm.
If they don't have 2 to 3 years at the current MSP, then at the previous MSP, we're hoping to see at least 3 years or so. Because remember, we're tapping on, some of these people aren't really looking if they've been there for a year. And I encourage companies to do this. Reach out to the network out there. It's at everybody's fingertips. Reach out, and if you know of somebody who is a stellar performer and they've been in a job for 6 to 12 months, they're not a quote unquote job hopper, but you're checking in to make sure that they're happy that they didn't make a mistake at the current position. And if they happen to be that one that made that mistake, then it's okay to have coffee, have a video call with
So
them.
it's not necessarily their current position because they're still in their current position, right?
Yeah,
It's maybe the current position or it's maybe the position before that at least 2 or 3 years, maybe longer, maybe a progression of positions, maybe not. What is there like an other side of the spectrum? Like if they just sat someplace in the same job for like 9 years, same title, is that
oh, yeah,
weird?
yeah, that too. I mean, that's like further down on the list of what not to have, because then that doesn't, if they've been a tech one for 10 years or so, let's say, um,
Yeah.
not happening. But they're more than likely not going to be in the industry at that point. They are more suited for an in-house position. Same thing with Tech 2, Tech 3. If we see a lot of career progression in a short period of time, then heck yeah. If we see an engineer that's a system engineer, senior engineer, network engineer with 15 years of experience, and we have placed people that have been with one company for 10 years. It's rather unlikely to do that. It's more likely to talk to somebody who has been around. They've been through the good and the bad for about 3 cycles, 3 years. That's what it is. It's 3 cycles, the good and the bad, as many as there are in there. There's four, let's say, in each year, for 4 quarters or so. They get to go through all the ups and downs of that company, and depending on how the owners and the leadership responded and handled those challenges.
So so hearing you say this, I am super surprised, or maybe not surprised, that the hiring websites I've seen don't have like an obvious button to click for that kind of thing. I don't know if I should be
No,
surprised or not about that,
this
but
is why you shouldn't be, because then that would discourage applicants. Why then candidates would not want to go on the website if they're not going to have as much luck. See, the big players out there, the two that come to mind, that's what they're doing. They're allowing candidates that are not qualified to be able to easily apply for positions that are totally out of their reach. Take that away from the applicants, and you ruin the whole luxury of the profitable, um, job posting process.
so there's several big names in that you can go to in terms of posting. Although if you compare these sites, they're not super different than each other. They don't even have super different like it's the same people on multiple sites, the same jobs on multiple sites being posted multiple times frequently. And
An
over the
object oriented
years,
language. It's like object oriented. Like there's similar languages. You just have to adapt to each one, probably.
well, and over the years, like Monster was the first big one on the scene, and that was like forever ago. It seems like, and every few years, there's been like a new big dog. I I can't really tell you what's changed there on the hiring side. I know on the ATS side and the HR side, there's been a lot of change. Are all these places like equal?
No, no, yeah, good question. Some companies have different applicant tracking systems that allow for more or less filtering.
On
And
the recruiting side, you're saying?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So you post a job out there on one of the big player websites, and an applicant comes through, gets ported through your own website. But at that point, hopefully it's hitting a company's applicant tracking system and to go through the what's called knock in and knock out parameters.
Hmm. So I've got a little mini ATS. I don't have one of the really nice ones, but I'm somewhat familiar with that process. I know that it can be a little overwhelming to consider building that whole castle when you're trying to service client accounts. And I know from experience, you can post a job and you can get 2 hits, or you could post the same job and get like literally a couple hundred hits because it's so easy on the hiring on the website, for applicants to just go click 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 click, copy paste chat GPT cover letter, which drives me crazy, by the way. And I don't know if you have an opinion on that, but when I see AI in the box, I would rather them have an empty box than like one of these AI like regurgitations of the profile that I posted. And it's like, yes, I know I posted that. Like, I don't need the AI summary spouted back to me. It clouds the space for the people that actually sit down and write something. Um, I so I'm just like imagining the last few times I went through that process. Uh, that sounds like a lot. I know that you have a methodology to really like forklift that off the service provider, not entirely because they can't be uninvolved, right? But really doing the heavy lifting. Um, where is that like a dividing line? Like, how much of that process is it realistic that if you're working on your own with a hiring site, how much do you need to own? How much do you need to depend on the site and the applicant for? Like, where the responsibility lines need to end? And then if you're working with someone like your shop, right? Does that change where the line sits in terms of responsibility and ownership of process there?
Of the candidate, that is.
Well, of the hirer, really, is what I'm thinking of. But maybe the candidate as well from that perspective. I think,
So
yeah.
if the candidate applies to a company and then we ultimately find them, if they've already applied to that company, let's say that's a candidate for that company. They have a, you
Uh
know,
huh.
they win. If the company reached out to the candidate and the candidate replied to them, they win. That's their candidate if they've gotten to that candidate before us, if that's what you're asking.
I
Um,
you know I that's an interesting thing that I hadn't even considered because I sort of figure, well, I'm either going to do this myself or I'm going to delegate this job to someone I trust. The idea that I would do all of the work and delegate it seems like an unnecessary duplication of effort. I was thinking, maybe I'm wrong about that. I was more curious about like if you are going to draw a line and say like this is your responsibility because I'm outsourcing this to you, recruiter, or I'm not going to outsource this, I need to do this job myself. Like, what are the list of things that you need to do as a hirer, and how does that change when you work with an outside agent?
okay. Well, theoretically, it either way, it's okay with me if they want to continue to look for other applicants and use us to compete. In fact, they can work with other agencies, and I'm okay with. I love it. It's great. Um,
Sounds like you're not worried about the competition.
I mean, I just like competition in a space that I know kind of what we're
Yeah.
doing, and I know that we've had competition out there from some pretty large and well-known recruiting companies in the industry, and we have a very good track record in those cases. So let's see, where were we going? I lost track. You mean me?
Oh, I was asking about how the responsibility shifts.
Okay,
When you,
so
yeah.
in that regard, the we onboard a customer and we let them. We kind of walk through the process of how we're going to go out to the market and headhunt talk with people that aren't even looking for jobs. We're going to fill them in on our process. And we talk to the candidates, get to know the candidate, their background, and summarize their background if they're interested, as well as get their resume if they have one and their salary expectations, and send that off to the client. Client says either they're interested or they're not interested. 96, 97% of the time this year, they said they were interested to make that first initial call, and had the phone call. We set up the scheduling because there's a heavy administrative burden there. So we set up the scheduling, make it seamless, and the customer just gives us feedback. They stay, we play two different roles. We're the role, we kind of help keep the candidates engaged, keep them interested, and set the expectation. On the customer side, we like to get things done in about 2 to 3 weeks. And if somebody has an offer, if they know an offer is coming, that we can get them an offer letter within a day of that. If there's too much of a gap between making that offer, or at least verbalizing that offer, and getting an offer letter out, the candidate's going to win a whole bunch of negotiating ability. So setting all the right expectations up front and thinking about all the things that you'd never ever think about if you don't do hiring a lot. That's the game, is to answer all of the questions ahead of time and get right to it. Yeah, recruiting fees can be expensive, but so is wasting time. So is wasting time looking at resumes, having multiple leaders involved in a recruiting and hiring process. That's spending more than you would on a recruiting fee on a monthly basis. Think about that. It's just absolutely crazy. And not optimizing the job postings. I was just pitched on using job postings again, and I just do not have it would place too much of an administrative burden on my team to do the job posting thing right, to get the number of hires that would not make sense to get with that amount of work.
That's really interesting. So to you, the posting process that most people use is somewhat of a distraction in terms of finding those candidates.
Nothing drives me more crazy than that. It really, really, yeah. It's kind of designed. It's like some medications. Or some companies out there. They're kind of designed for you to be hooked on them.
So I want to go back to the timeline again. So I've definitely talked to people for months who were like on the edge of like thinking about trying to hire, saying they're trying to hire, actually trying to hire, still no candidates, still don't have the right person. Um, but what's a normal timeline from beginning to end through your process? What's like? Is there a range? Is there a normal?
Yeah, the ideal from the time that a candidate is put in process, meaning the resume is sent, or the candidate says I'm interested. From that period of time, ideally getting to an answer, a decision of a yes or no, between 2 to 3 weeks. That is the ideal process.
What about before that? What about the hunt part? Is that something that's variable, right?
It is, depending on location, depending on if we've done a search there recently, or how far along in the past, how many people that we have in our current database and all. Um, but also if it's a five day a week on site role versus hybrid, or versus a few times a month go visit the client, that makes a difference. I anticipate that remote jobs are going to start to dwindle for U.S. employees. I think it's a huge risk for U.S. employees to work remotely, or it's at this time. That's my personal thing, because there are so many other options. Just like California is able to hire people in lower cost of living areas, there are now a lot lower cost of living areas in the entire world that are going to be competing with the remote engineers in the
You're
US
you're saying as labor,
as
as
labor.
labor, as an employee, you're
Mhm.
at risk because you're substable. Is that what you're saying?
If you are remote
Yeah,
and
if
you're
you're
in the
remote.
US.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, that's really interesting. I know that for certain types of work, that's been the case for a long time. For in the IT industry, there's been certain types of work that it's just been really difficult to compete on. One of those things is I'm in the security world. I'm going to tell you, as a if you're looking for like a mid-range pen test, right? Like a medium pen test, right? That is an area where it is nearly impossible to hire or be hired in the United States because the talent has polarized. You've got like this really high end talent, and then you have this talent that like really doesn't know which end of a pen testing wand is up. And the middle theoretically could exist, but it's been offshored because there's really competitive labor markets out there. And the thing about pen testing is you don't need to worry about like operating like a shared company culture. These teams aren't even talking to each other. It's just like this task that goes out. Someone does the thing, it comes back. So that type of work was offshored in my little corner of the industry long before COVID. But I think what you're saying is like insert remote job here, right, is now at risk, and I believe it because frankly, there's really good talent out there, pretty much everywhere.
It's just a matter of companies discovering how to find that talent.
Yeah. So, yeah, as an employee, if you are remote, right, it sounds like look for that hybrid opportunity, or maybe ask if you could come into the office more frequently.
Get a position. The trend is are these positions where you can, ideally be within a half hour to an hour commute to a customer and work. Mostly it's genuinely a remote position, but you have to go on site 3 to 5 times a month. You get to interact with some people, 3 to 5 times a month, and work remote.
It's funny, that 3 to 5 times a month number. So I was a management consultant for a long time. IT technology strategy. Spent some time operating and working for MSPs. And that was my situation since like 2005. 3 to 5 times a month, I was at client sites, at wherever. But most of the time, I was at home, at my home office. I now rent an office because I think it's great leaving the house. But um, I thought of myself as a remote worker, going 3 to 5 times a week, and it's been like redefined. There's this thing called hybrid now, um,
Yeah,
and it's interesting, that cultural shift, I think.
yeah, it's a new thing, relatively new, almost 5 years.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know that it's existed longer. I'm saying I've been doing it for
Yeah,
25 years, but
yeah.
there's a name now apparently for that. And
Oh yeah.
it's not remote. Remote is like what? You're a hermit. You like never leave your house. No, like I'm never going to the company. Like I can't even imagine that mentality. But I am aware that exists. Right? People have no interest in ever going to their employer's office, ever going to anywhere except for their house. Right?
And my advice is be a very, very, very niche specialist if you're going to do that. Be irreplaceable. Know something that is just so hard to find all over the world.
Well, I lost track of time here, and I could just like keep interviewing you
Sounds
because
fun. Yeah.
I'm just super interested about this. But I do want to hear about your practice. So you are like specifically dedicated to the MSP or the IT professional service provider space, right?
Yes.
And tell me about vertical. When should people call you? Like, what steps? What should they do before they call you? That kind of thing.
Well, have a need, have a need or be curious about hiring. If you are an MSP in the United States, an MSSP in the United States, or you just need to hire system engineers, admins, or techs with MSP experience, we headhunt those candidates for companies all over the country. And have a need or just be curious. For example, if you have a problem posting a job, you want to know how to optimize that, let's talk. We're in the industry. I'm sure you know a lot of people that we need to hire and want to do some other things. I'm willing to give advice, to most people out there that that feel that appreciate the advice that I have to offer. And because I've got a lot of it when it comes to hiring. I'm kind of obsessed with efficiency. A lot of people who know me really well understand that. So when it comes to hiring, after 26 years of doing so, I am now focusing on the MSP industry exclusively. I'm able to fine tune and take the most efficient actions possible to fill jobs with excellent people.
Now, I know that you told me that you've been specializing in engineering talent, but you recently, the sales roles have become an interesting area for you, right?
Yeah, they have the key there, and thanks for reminding me on that. This is something that we will be launching in Q1. So for to it's kind of what do you call that? An introductory offer, let's say, for anybody listening to this podcast or this live stream. If you are in the MSP industry and need some salespeople, which a lot of you do, let's have a conversation. I've got some ideas and confidence around finding the right people, and it has a lot to do with the assessments that I talked about earlier today, and it has to do a lot with just identifying people that know how to get through the good and the bad. You know,
All right. And I'm just going to throw, I believe, please tell me I got this correct. Is this the right website here?
that should do it, unless they read changed or redirected. You could also
All right.
verticaltalentsolutions.com is okay, but yeah, that's the
All
best way
right.
to answer that question. That's You can contact me there. LinkedIn. If you contact me on LinkedIn, I get back lickety split.
Yeah. Yeah. Seems like you probably live there.
One of my best friends says it's my kingdom. I don't know if I'd go that far, but it was quite the compliment.
All right. Well, next week we have a special show. It's our 2024 channel realignment year in review. We did a year in review last year in our partner community, brought some of the partners together this year, and they got really excited about just how like the IT channel has realigned around subscriptions, around SaaS, around cloud. So that's what we're going to be talking about next week, next Friday. See you all then. And until then, like, share, subscribe. Thanks everyone for joining.
Thanks, Matthew.